Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome to another amazing episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. And before we introduce our guest tonight, because tonight our show is going to be very guest-laden, we have a friend of ours who used to work with Hannah on another podcast called Heretical Minds. And he's going to be joining our show for a couple of segments to talk about, I don't know, Trump maybe? His election? Whether he's crazy? Just some shit like that. And we're going to also debunk a Prager University video, because we think we might make that a new segment, but we need you to go to iTunes and rate us. We need you to send us an email at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. We need you to send us a Facebook message. Tell us something. Do you want us to debunk these Prager University videos? Because I don't think a lot of people have done that, and it seemed very interesting at the time, something Joseph kind of brought to us as a group, and we've been working on for about a month now. And I think that it's a very interesting topic. And as we close the show off for the last segment, we have an interview with author Matthew James from a book, Only an Atheist Can Help God Save the World. It kind of goes like this. Jeffrey is an atheist living an ordinary life in England when God pays him an unexpected visit. And hear the author out. It is not a preach at you book that you're going to go, oh no, I don't want to read this. It's a sarcastic, fictional view of what could happen if God really did exist and had to come convince some atheists to save the world. But as we begin the show tonight with our friend Joseph and my co-host Mr. Chris Hanna, he's going to make fun of me. I already know it because I said amazing, and I seem to always say amazing, but that's how I feel about our show. I maybe I sound like Donald Trump, but with our topics tonight and the conversation at hand, I think it's imperative and important that we take some time to reflect on what has happened, on what has transpired over the last week. Ted Cruz and John Kanish have dropped out of the race, leaving Donald Trump as the sole candidate for the Republican Party. But what I want to kind of talk about tonight is if Donald Trump, like my co-host and our guest here, think that maybe Donald Trump is crazy. And I've typically when we record, I have to redo the intro to some of these segments a couple times because it takes me a few minutes to get my bearings. But what if we did a live show, Chris? If we ever did one, I mean, how would we just have to accept my intros? Would we not?
Yeah, we can easily do a 3-time intro where you finally have something unique instead of amazing for the intro.
Amazing. I sound like Trump. Yes, come on. And Trump's now part of the electoral ballot, right? He's officially the
It just makes me angry.
Trump should just say, I know, instead of saying, oh, he knows all the words, he should just say, I know have all the words.
I have 3 words. Make America great. Look, I could do it. I could do Trump. I could beat Trump. I could fucking go up on Trump's stage. We could do all this right now.
The big problem is if you're gonna do a legitimate Trump, you have to come over here. I'll get the power drill out. We'll complete a lobotomy, and then you can be Donald Trump.
No. I think he's smarter than you're giving him credit for, buddy.
Trump?
No.
Yeah, I do think. No. Sorry.
The guy's fantastic at being a brand master. That doesn't make him a smart person.
I do think he's a smart person. I think he's knowing how he plays. I think he lacks empathy and morals, personally.
I can see why someone would come to that conclusion, because I think that he's decided to do whatever it takes to attain power, and I get that. But at the same time, I've heard him represent every view.
It's all about the money. He's all about the Benjamins, dude. It's all about the Benjamins, whatever that song is.
Right now, I don't think this is about the money. I think this is about his ego.
It could be that, too. He's probably not making much money. Well, I do think he's making money on it, but...
Yeah, he's betting on himself.
But, okay, can you blame him, though? I mean, okay, think about
it. Yes, I can blame him.
You can't. No, you can't. If you could be president of the United States because you're like, hey, I'm fantastic and fuck everybody else, and if they don't
then I would be a horrible person. and it would be really stupid of me. I'm not qualified to be president of the United States.
It doesn't matter.
I know this about myself, and he isn't qualified to be president of the United States, and he doesn't know about himself. He thinks that he's totally qualified when he's not. He's dumb.
No, he's not dumb. It doesn't make him dumb just because of that. Just because you disagree with him as president does not make him dumb. And I don't want any. Don't think I'm for Trump. I will not vote for Trump. Just so everybody knows, there was no way ever, unless even if you held a gun to my head, well, I probably would vote Trump then. But outside of holding a gun to my head, I'm not going to vote Trump. But you have to admit that there is some intelligence, whether it's his or people working for him. You do have to admit there is an intelligent campaign going behind what he's doing.
He's very, very smart at one very specific thing, and that is his own brand name. He's very, very good at getting his brand out and maintaining his brand. But if you actually inspect his brand, it's like what John Oliver said about it. He's like a gold Sharpie. You know, looks really great from a distance, but you get close to it and
it smells bad. It's like rotten fish.
It stinks, and it's not particularly high dollar or high quality anything.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Okay, hold on. So that's the best part of this. That does not matter because that's not what people give a shit about. People don't care about whether it's Trump or not. They're not like, oh, holy shit, we want the good smelling markers. They don't say that shit. They look at it. They go
because they don't care that he's able to convince them that it's not gold Sharpie, it's real gold, and that's the problem.
But that's not a problem in terms of intelligence. That's just a problem in terms of morality. That's the base level of it. So what? You're right. Trump.
He's so able to get his brand name out there that he's convincing people that he's smart.
No, he's not. He admits, he doesn't say, I'm smart, therefore I do this. He just says, I'm going to fucking do this. Either you like it or you don't fucking like it. And I don't give a shit whether you like it or not. Exactly. 2 Corinthians. I mean, come on, for fuck's sake. There is nothing involved in Trump that says, hey, look at me. I'm the most intelligent person in the world. But he knows what he's doing. He knows how he's playing it. He's not dumb. He's not a dumb person. He has a high probability of winning the election depending on the candidates that go into it and depending on what the Republican Party does in the next, couple weeks.
I will credit him as much intelligence, probably a bit more than George W. Bush, but no more than that.
But Bush got elected twice, so I don't know what to tell you, dude.
Well, I'm not saying that he can't win. I think he can totally win.
I will basically say that Trump is of below average intelligence when it comes to more than one or two things, like what you said, brand stuff. But I will say that he is the he is the manifestation. I know, but he is the manifestation of our society's decadence and ignorance and just the lack of how we have persecuted intelligence and intellectual shaming. Like he is the manifestation of that. This horrifying destiny of
Hannah, hold on.
He's a Grandmaster Savant, man. He's a Grandmaster Savant.
Fair enough, but hold on. No, I disagree with you. Hold on, Hannah. Just because you don't agree with his positions doesn't make the people that do dumb. You have to stop and look at that. You have to stop and no, hold on. You can't empirically claim that. If Christopher Hitchens were sitting right here, he'd hitch slap you right now. You can't claim that without actually presenting why. But so if you're going to do it, present why right now.
Because he's represented every opinion for everything.
That doesn't
make
you dumb.
He's done that just within the last year. So agreeing with him means you're also disagreeing with him, which means you're also agreeing with him, which means you're also disagreeing.
Or you're evolving with him. You're evolving with Trump. Because
it's not evolution to contradict yourself 3 or 4 times within the same conversation. That's not evolution. That's playing the crowd.
I disagree.
And anyone who isn't able to see that, he totally does that.
All right, so you're going to find an example.
Yes, I am. Planned Parenthood. Easy, right now. I've seen him in interviews and so on and so forth, criticizing Planned Parenthood, calling it murder, etc., etc., etc. Then in the debate, no.
But hold on. Stop. Joseph, I'm going to stop you right there. Because you said in one breath, basically.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I wasn't suggesting it's the same sitting.
Joseph.
Hold on. I'm going to stop you. Hold on a second. in one breath, you sat there and said, hey, Trump contradicts himself 3 times in a conversation. Now, you can't take 2 conversations separately.
I'm talking about this conversation. I can come up with it with... I'm talking about this conversation between you and me. I'm not talking about a conversation that he might have.
So my point
I'm talking about this conversation.
So you can contradict yourself 3 times, and that's fine. Good for you. I'm telling you, is Trump? Yeah, you're right, Trump. But if evolution doesn't say that, it dictates that we just sit here and we can't evolve. So the problem.
I don't have a problem with him changing his mind if he would admit that that's what he did. If a politician comes forward and says,
"Hey, to admit it," that doesn't make you dumb.
Then they didn't change their mind. They're contradicting themselves, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, and it doesn't. But that's not the point, though. You're missing the whole landscape here. We're missing this big landscape of a conversation here, because the problem is that Trump is not, whether he contradicts himself in one conversation or the other, he's changing his mind. So what's wrong with that? I mean, look. Kerry flip-flopped.
Because he's not saying that. Because he didn't say. He doesn't say out loud. I was wrong in the past when I had that opinion.
But Kerry doesn't do that. Kerry never did that either. Kerry never admitted he flip-flopped. Kerry flip-flopped. But doesn't make him an idiot. That's the problem. We're arguing whether he's wrong or right. Who cares? I'm telling you, I'm not going to argue whether he's wrong or right. I'm telling you that for the fact is he's not dumb. That Trump is an intelligent individual, that he knows what the fuck he's doing, and that, yeah, we can both agree he might be wrong in what he's doing, but that does not mean he's an idiot or an idiot savant.
He is a master branding savant. That is, if I had to define him, that would be the definition.
All right, hold on. We have to let Hannah talk, because we've over-talked Hannah quite a bit.
Well, all I would say is that what I said a moment ago, and I would say he is of average or below intelligence on worldwide understanding and knowledge, and something that would be considered an intelligent quotient test. And the reason I say that is because of the number of times in his just manner of speech, when he talks normally, he fails to understand basic concepts. Like, one of the ones that gets me is he was at a religious university, and he doesn't understand how the Bible is put together. Like, these are types of things that almost everyone who has ever been remotely connected with some type of biblical study or some kind of reading of the Bible knows that it's first and second and third and fourth, and that's the way these things are.
So he lied.
So he doesn't. Yeah, no one.
So he lied.
He's
Who
yeah.
cares?
So he's lying,
like,
and but like we used to say
that doesn't make him
George
dumb.
W. Bush.
Just because you lie doesn't make you dumb.
No, but like we used to say that George W. Bush was pretty bad at speaking, and he said dumb things on a regular basis. That is indicative of not being very well read, not being very well traveled, very intelligent. And that is where I'm making my stuff. So, like, unless we had an intelligence quotient test, or we had his MEEP scores, let's face it, Donald Trump's MEEP scores probably aren't too high. And so, whatever, if you want to go into that, for our personal opinion that he sounds and probably is a pretty ignorant person, that's the basis. If you want me to say that, yes, I know that his SAT scores was below the national average, no, I can't make that quantification. But let's face it, in this world, we're going to be making some assumptions. And Trump is one of those people I would assume.
Okay, but you are making assumptions, though. So we have it on record that you're making an assumption. You cannot claim this is fact. This is not fact.
This is a man who said that he would be willing to sleep with his own daughter if she wasn't his own daughter. This is a man who accidentally suggested that. No. This is a man. Yes.
He said he would date his daughter. He said he would date his daughter.
Yes, he totally did. This is a man. This is the same man who accidentally got in trouble for signing himself onto a Mussolini quote before he had the nerve and wit to agree. Oh, maybe I should double check to see where this is from.
This is turning out to be Chris has to defend Trump segment here. For fuck's sake, why the fuck do I got to defend Trump? This is bullshit. There should be at least a little bit of integrity from the two of you.
He has a skill. He has a very potent skill. I'll be the first to admit it.
Look, you can apologize away his Mussolini coat, Joseph. It's simple. It's simple. It's the fact that he is just like every other fucking politician. He's not going and doing the research himself. He's got 100 million goddamn people feeding him information. So he's taking this information. He's like, and then all of a sudden he's like, shit. I should not have. Hold on. shit, I shouldn't have said that, right? I shouldn't have said that, but I did. So why would I excuse it? You know, let's just pretend like it never fucking happened. He just exudes extreme amount of confidence that he just doesn't care what people think, and he's been successful at it.
And if he was just ignorant, I wouldn't have a problem with him. If he was just ignorant, if he was just ignorant, I wouldn't have a problem with him. It's not his ignorance that I have a problem with. Okay, my favorite fucking quote in the entire world is the greatest enemy of intelligence is not ignorance. It's the illusion of intelligence. And that's exactly what's going on with Donald.
I disagree. He's not alluding. He is intelligent, and the difference is he doesn't give a fuck if you don't like what he says. He doesn't care. He's so goddamn confident. He does not give a flying fuck.
And that's the problem. He wouldn't know if he was wrong. He doesn't.
That doesn't make him.
He doesn't submit his ideas to the process of learning something new or improving his general way of being.
No, he doesn't care to predict it to you. That's the difference. He does not give a flying fuck if you know it or anybody else knows it. All he cares about personally in his own being is that he said it and he's going to be famous and he's going to become a president. He doesn't give a shit if you think he's right or not.
That doesn't make him smart. That makes him an egomaniac. And egomaniacs, by and large, are not necessarily smart people. So you're assigning intelligence to a person. Well, let's actually look at this guy's job history. Let's actually look at what he's done. Well, we know he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. We know that. We also know that he filed for bankruptcy several times shortly after and through his time.
Okay, so stop right there. We're going to stop right there. So he filed for bankruptcy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it didn't ruin his wealth. He didn't have to pay out. No, it didn't.
Of course. I said, of course it didn't. I said, of course it didn't.
Okay, Joseph, if I were going to point a gun at you and say, hey, look, here, you can either give me your $10 in your pocket, or I could shoot you in the leg, and you can give me $9 and you can keep your $1. Or I can fucking shoot you in the chest, and you have a 50% chance of living, but you get to keep all your money, right? So he's going to take the loophole that allows him to have the maximum amount of whatever. That doesn't make him dumb.
It doesn't
or
make
you can
anybody
choose
dumb. It
not
just
to get
makes you
yourself
think-
in the situation where the person's pointing you at the gun at your chest in the
dumb.
first place.
I'm sorry, I disagree with you. It doesn't make you a dumb person.
If
Let's
you are
define
born with
dumb.
a silver spoon in your mouth, if you are born with a silver spoon in your mouth, if you're born wealthy, okay, wealthy in this country, born wealthy, you're given the best education, you're given the best of the best in everything, okay, and you end up filing for bankruptcy, then you have probably made some mistakes along the way. Now, I'm not suggesting that.
What if he did it on purpose?
Then you're evil.
Okay, so fine, but does it make you dumb? Thank you. He could be evil. I'll agree with you on that.
I'm going to say that people are not evil because they're malevolent. Malevolence in human beings is really a non-existent thing. People are more often malevolent because they're ignorant than for any other reason, because they haven't looked into the consequences of their action.
I disagree with you. Or they can't comprehend the consequences of their action because they can't feel or disagree. That doesn't make you dumb. All that does is make you an asshole. Donald Trump's an asshole. Fine. I'll agree with that.
So you're saying he's a sociopath. He's devoid of morality. He has absolutely no sense of morality. That's what you're saying? I don't agree with that. I think that he thinks that he knows best.
Hold on. So no, I don't ever say absolute. So I'm not going to let you quote me on that. He's not absolute because there's no such thing as absolutes. I don't believe in fucking absolutes, and you know that. And I will pull the fucking theology trick on it. Thank you. I'm going to do that. You did say absolutely.
Okay, what I'm saying is, well, if he's a sociopath or a psychopath, that's a clinical diagnosis. Okay, I have no idea whether or not he is.
And you would be better.
I'm pretty sure he's not. If I had to define him, I'm betting the guy's capable of empathy. So I'm very doubtful that he's a psychopath or a sociopath.
But I do think psychopath. Okay, so hold on. And maybe this will turn interesting because this maybe you can school me. So I'll grant you on that. To my understanding, is like a sociopath is able to feel empathy on some occurrences. It's not a absolute that they can never feel empathy. It's just not as heavy of an occurrence, and their mentality allows them to be able to push that empathy away faster.
Okay, well, this is the way it works. Okay, anyone, even a non-scientific. I'm talking about the science of murder now.
Your degrees and that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this is from my study. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So
I just wanted to define that because
All right. So
let's define that.
All right. So there's fundamental thing about murder, and that is that anyone can commit it. Anyone can commit murder. However, there is a demographic of individuals who don't have a problem with murder, who don't have nightmares because of it, who don't get haunted because of it, okay? It doesn't bother them. These are psychopaths. Now, just because you're a psychopath does not mean that you're going to commit murder. Doesn't mean you're going to become Ted Bundy. Doesn't mean you're going to be violent even. A psychopath is simply someone who is devoid of empathy. They probably lie pathologically. They probably cheat, sleep around. They probably have no sense of natural morality. They prey on people. Okay, that's what a psychopath is. The way I like to think about it is sociopaths don't care about other people. Okay, psychopaths positively enjoy preying on other people.
Hold on. So let me ask a question. So the only big difference is one enjoys the preying versus one does not enjoy it or just feels nothing for it.
Yeah, both of them are going to have problems, and okay, so think of it as like a 1 to 10 gauge, where someone could fill the blank for 5 on the sociopath link and maybe 7 for the psychopath link, and they could be both. Okay, and the same actually exists with many other illnesses. An example of that would be a schizoaffective disorder, which is basically just schizophrenia plus bipolar. Okay, so understand that these are complex diagnoses that in fact, many people have said that schizoaffective disorder shouldn't be considered to exist because it's just those two things. It should be treated as those two things in the same person. Other people disagree. This is a complex situation where you have multiple components that factor in. But what we're talking about specifically is 2 problems, fundamental. One of them is a lack of empathy. Okay? If someone lacks empathy, then it's very, very difficult to convince them that other people should matter. Okay? One of the fears that I have about people with high egos, strong egos, is a fear about how much empathy they might have because they seem to only give a crap about themselves. Okay? But that's a clinical diagnosis, and so you actually would have to have... I'm not qualified to diagnose him in that sense. I'm just not. So I don't worry about it. But beyond that, beyond calling him evil in that sense, most psychopaths, the majority of them, are intelligent people who live within the fabric of the law. Most of them are nonviolent. In fact, most of them become what society defines as heroes. Most of them, they take on jobs that no one else would take on. An example of that at work is what's called the trolley problem. Okay, imagine 50 people on one side of the end of a train track, and then you have 5 people at the end of another set of train tracks, and you have the ability to switch them, and you see a trolley running along that's going to kill the 50 people. Okay, you pull the switch, and you killed 5 people instead of letting 50 people die. Okay, this is what's the trolley problem. It's pretty well known within philosophy and within morality. Okay, the psychopath doesn't get haunted at all by the fact that he pulled that lever. He accepts it. It doesn't hurt him. He's okay. 5 people are dead, and there's no social or there's no psychological consequence for having done that. So that doesn't necessarily make him evil. He didn't necessarily do something bad. You get what I'm saying? Pulling that lever saved 50 lives, and he knows it. He also doesn't necessarily feel any particular goodness for having done that either, because he has no sense of empathy. He can't feel for them. So it's complex and more difficult to express and explain from that perspective if you're talking about a clinical diagnosis.
So okay, let's roll with that aspect, right? Let's just roll with that. So if they don't feel and maybe this is just me. This is somebody that's only got an associate's degree having this conversation. But on my side of the things, so if that sociopath is not prone to murder, let's say they're not prone to going outside of the comfort zones or the social confines that we all live in for the most part, and that individual doesn't feel the empathy, are they able to pull that lever easier than somebody like Chris Hanna? We'll just pick on Chris Hanna, because if Chris Hanna had to decide, I guarantee you Chris Hanna would agonize over it probably, let's just say 50% longer than the sociopath would, because he's not going to see this as this complex thing. He's going to understand that, hey, holy shit, there's people that's going to die, and how do I save both of them? Because he's a Bernie supporter, right? That's the first thing that he's going to do, is he's going to go, how do I make the maximum amount of happiness for everybody?
We need psychopaths within our society. They are the wolves among us.
So are they part of evolution?
Almost certainly.
Part of
Almost
our
certainly. It's important to remember that evolution acts upon groups and not individuals. Okay.
Exactly.
Evolution is acts upon groups and not individuals, and so as a result, psychopaths might be useful to the group. There might be a requirement for one or two of them to continue to exist. Why? Well, because they're willing to make the hard choices that no one else is willing to make for the survival of the group.
And so I think that fits really closely because, okay, so I've been listening to some science podcasts about consciousness. So consciousness has been a big thing for me for whatever reason. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I've obsessed about it for the last 6 months. And so I've been listening to some podcasts that have these scientists on. They interview these scientists that talk about, the evolution of the brain and which parts of the brain evolve first and which ones evolve last. And they talk quite a bit about how with our brain, the way the frontal cortex evolves later in life, it matures. I guess they don't say evolves, but it matures later. And life is done for a reason so that we can adapt to the society around us faster. And it allows us to survive longer because our species has taken groups and made groups in this social function different than a lot of other species have. So, monkeys interact very similar to we do, but we interact on a secondary style level. Our consciousness allows us to see things in a different way. And so when we interact, it allows our grouping, which has helped us survive for a long time, to continue. And because our frontal cortex matures later, it allows us to accept different things and adapt, if you want to call it, in our lifetime faster than other species do.
Well, we have the longest gestation period of just about any creature out there that I know of with our brain to natural weight ratio. It's so high that it takes 17 18 years in some cases, sometimes 13 14 years or whatever, for humans to become of a natural pubescent age to leave the nest, so to speak. That's the late formation that you're talking about. And there's a variety of things and benefits that we talk about, all of these different social and psychological awarenesses and variations and things. I mean, they could just represent the probability of things happening throughout evolution, and we're making speculation as to what is really happening. And then they could represent useful tools within the human social structure that evolution is taking advantage of. Yeah. These are a variety of really useful postulations as to what's actually happening. But I mean, as far as tying it into Trump, it might be hard.
I don't buy that he's any smarter than I am. I don't buy it. Okay. I don't buy it. I'm not a genius, okay? I'm aware of my own intelligence. I'm a person with a high amount of specialty in one area. That's what I am. I'm a person with a high amount of specialty in one area. I know a lot about one thing. That doesn't make me a genius at math. There are things that Hannah knows about that I can't talk about. I don't have any clue of what it is. Yes, I can talk about my subject, my thing that I'm good at, and because everyone knows different things, that doesn't make me smart. That just means that I'm highly specialized in an area. He is specialized in mastering his own brand.
Yeah, so fair enough. So we can all at least agree that he's not dumb, that he has at least average intelligence, the same as the rest of us do. That's what I just got out of this whole conversation here, is you just admitted he's specialized, therefore you can't prove he's dumb.
I know a man who can tell you the specific day of the year that you were born, based upon the date. So if you tell him the date, he can tell you that he was born on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. Okay? He can tell you.
I was right. Just admit I was right.
I'm not admitting that. Being specialized does not make you intelligent. Okay, it doesn't. It just makes you an expert in one thing. Well, and if your only expertise is being a master of your own brand and getting your own name out there and getting people to know who you are, if that's the only thing you're good at, which seems to be the case with him, considering the amount of failures that he's mounted.
But I don't think his bankruptcies are failures in the aspect that you think they are. But let's move off Cruz a second. Hold on, or move off Trump a second. Let's move off Trump. We have to address Cruz, right? We have to address the fact that we have an individual that has dropped out of the race. That he was I would call what the GOP backup. I guess it was when Trump took over. They're like, holy shit, maybe we should go with Cruz, even though I think Cruz is more of a harm. So Hannah, you haven't talked a lot.
Well, I was trying to put in my final sense for Trump, but I was unable to do so. All I was saying is that in life, the assumptions that you jumped on, that you said you're making assumptions, and therefore I've got you, Chris. I make assumptions all the time about everyone I meet. It makes life easier because it's impossible to know everything at all times. And so when I meet someone and I have to basically go with the way they carry themselves, the way they interact with other humans, the way they speak, that's how I form a basic assumption for what I know about that person. Anything and everything I have ever seen, oh yeah, I can be wrong. And in this case, everything that I've ever seen from Donald Trump would put him as the kind of person, if I met and saw acting that way in public, in person, I would see him as of lower intelligence and probably very ignorant on a variety of things.
You're biased based on your personal experience.
Oh, I know that. But
hold on, Joseph, hold on.
And so if you would let me finish a sentence for the one time tonight, Tanner, seriously. All it is that I am making an assumption on a person like you do on every single person you see on TV anywhere. Okay, dude? That's the way it is. And I know you want to play logic and apologetics on this, but you're making assumptions in the same such way that you're assuming that he may be intelligent even though he's acted kind of stupid. I think he's my assumptions from personal experience, yes, this is not I'm not doing a logic debate here. He's just kind of an ignorant jackass. That is how I gauge people.
No, that's your opinion, though. Your opinion is he's an ignorant jackass. So we could define this, though, because if we defined intelligence normally, what we would do is we would look at the intelligence side of things, right? And we would say if he took some sort of IQ test and took all these other tests, that would define whether he's intelligent or not. So we aren't going to solve this tonight. We aren't going to solve this in this show. We won't solve this in any way, shape, or form. I will concede that I have biases, yes. But my biases say that I'm opportunistic and I wouldn't judge him based on how I see him on a business prowl, and I see his lean towards the presidency just another business venture for him. Whether you think it's successful or not won't matter, because in the end for him, his success is based on whether he gets the nomination.
Well, I don't think that success defines whether or not someone is intelligent. If I have to make an assumption, I have to make an assumption about between malevolence, evil, and stupidity, I'm going to go with stupidity. The reason is
whatever you want, but that doesn't mean he's stupid.
Well, no, the reason I'm going to go with stupidity is because I know that human natural bias leans the other direction. We're more likely to consider something evil than we are stupid, and the reason we're more likely to consider something evil than more stupid is because at least then there's a plan. I think the Joker said it well. If I blow up a bunch of soldiers, everyone's cool with it. But if I blow up a bus or have a politician killed, everyone loses their minds because it's not part of the plan. Well, that's the reason, and that's exactly the point.
But that doesn't make the Joker stupid. It just makes him crazy. You're still not proving the point.
And I'm not saying the Joker's stupid or crazy. That's a quote. I get it. The point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is that. Point. Yes, I am. The point that I'm making is that I'm more likely to assume. I'm more likely to assume that that stupidity or ignorance or incompetence is the result of something bad than I am to assume that evil and malevolence is. And the reason I'm more likely to make that assumption is because I know that my internal bias, because I'm human, is to make the opposite assumption of that, is to assume evil and agency when there probably isn't.
Fair enough. So with that note, we can't talk about Trump any longer. We've hit our time limit for this segment, and so the best part of this is that as we move away into our commercial, because that's what we have to do. We have to honor the commercials, especially because M. Dolan was so gracious to talk about us on other podcasts, and he had such a great time on our interview. If you have not listened to that yet, make sure you go back to episode 28 and listen to our interview with M. Dolan about his personal upbringing with child abuse. But when we come back from this commercial break, we're going to talk about Prager University with our friend Joseph and my co-host Chris Hanna, because nothing's stupider than Prager University. And we'll be right back after this quick commercial break. Make sure you stick around, everyone.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're promoting secular feminism.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Like what you're hearing? Check out more Cellar Door Skeptics every week right here on Spreaker and iTunes. Make sure you come back and check out new episodes with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. And always, remember, prepare for the revolution.
What will a child do when there is no way out?
Chris might have told you that his mother's boyfriend was strict, but he wasn't your run-of-the-mill evil stepfather.
Gracious, Chris, what are you doing out so late?
A shocking blitzkrieg of murder, conspiracy, and child abuse.
Publishers Weekly.
A grotesquely powerful tale that deserves to be read.
Heresy in the Heartland.
Who is Alan Garfield?
Depending on who you believe, he is either a celebrated Christian minister or the leader of a child abuse cult.
1324 by M. Dolan Hickman. Available on Amazon.com.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for sticking around through that first segment where we discuss whether Donald Trump is a competent, stupid, or evil individual. So we won't go back into that because I think you heard enough of discussion between the three of us. And we welcome back to the show Joseph because he's a good friend of ours. He's a former co-host of Chris Hanna's, and he was always a pleasure to have on when I was on Atheist Analysis. And I can't tell you, Joseph, how much of an honor it is to actually be able to have a conversation with you, even though we live thousands of miles away.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thank you. And people can go, well, this is weird, or why are you guys doing this? But Joseph has always brought a voice to the conversation, and he's always been a great equal to the three of us. And we really do genuinely appreciate you taking the time out of your day to have a conversation. And for our next segment, though, the best part of this next segment is this was Joseph's idea. So Joseph messaged us and said, hey, I kind of miss hanging out with you guys. We have great conversations. I wish we could just talk every night. If we never had girlfriends or wives, we would never have to worry about this, right? We could just get rid of that part of our lives that we could just talk online all the damn time. But
I don't know about any of that.
we can't do that. But we can have a conversation. He talked about debunking Prager University. And if for those of you who have not ever checked them out, you literally should grab the link in the description, prageru.com. And they have a whole website, and it's their whole website is ridiculous. And you, as soon as you see it, you'll just go, ugh. So their mission statement, this is what their mission statement is. They say, the greatest threat to America is that most Americans don't know what makes America great. Kind of sounds like Donald Trump. PragerU's mission is to explain and spread what we call Americanism through the power of the internet. Our 5-minute videos are conservative sound bites that clarify profoundly significant and unique American concepts for more than 100 million people a year. And so Joseph mentions us and he said, have you ever watched any of these videos? And I was like, yes, I have. They come up all the time in my conversations with my uncle, which if you listened to last episode, I bitched quite heavily about. And we won't get into that tonight. But Prager is one of those things that he always used to shove my way and say, look, this is proof. And so we thought, what better than to have a conversation about one of their videos called Does God Exist? 4 New Arguments. And what we want to do before we go any farther, because you've already heard Joseph and Chris talk a tiny bit earlier. Before we go any farther, what we want to do is play the first part of it. And what you're going to do is you're going to hear this dude's explanation for what he feels science is telling us about the universe coming into being via the Big Bang. He says there's a thing called 4 Big Bangs. All right, so I'm going to play the clip right now, And then what we're going to do is when we end it, we'll have a conversation about what he feels the first Big Bang is. So we'll be right back. Hold on 1 second.
You know, for 27 years, I was an atheist. I thought anyone who believed in a god or gods was, well, stupid or uneducated, naive, gullible, or just into the gig for money, sex, and power. I mean, after all, everyone knows that religion is just a psychological crutch for intellectual weaklings, right? So, what changed my mind? Well, look, I tell the whole story in my book, Shattered, but for our purposes here on Prager University, I was simply challenged by my Christian teammates on the Cincinnati Reds to read some religious books, critique them, and then share with the guys where the authors were wrong and why atheism is the only real and true outlook for anyone not deceived by fantasy, fiction, or mythology. I mean, for someone who wants to base their beliefs and values upon evidence and argument, not emotion and tradition. Now look, simply put, I set out to disprove theism, which I didn't think would take very long. But I ran into some difficulties along the way. Difficulties like Aristotle, Augustine, Aquinas. I mean, in simple terms, I was confronted with the awareness that there are really 4 big bangs that have to be accounted for, not just one. I had never really even considered that before. I mean, we're all familiar with the first Big Bang, right? It's usually the answer given to the question, why is there something rather than nothing? It's the idea that there was nothing, it popped, and boom, there's something. I mean, that time, matter, and space all came into existence in some great cosmological flash about 16 billion years ago. There was no gradual development, no transitional forms, just a binary flip, a metaphysical, now you don't see it, and now you do. Fine, I want to follow the evidence wherever it leads. However, astrophysicists tell us that this first Big Bang yielded only a handful of fundamental elements, and that it would take billions and billions of years for the nuclear furnaces of trillions of stars to yield the 118 elements in the periodic table. But the first theoretical cosmological Big Bang, well, it only yields matter and energy. It doesn't even begin to address the origin of life. So, how do you get life from non-life?
Oh, put your fucking helmet on. This is so bad. Oh my God, the stupid, it hurts. Like what? I can't deal with that video. I can't stand listening to the fallacies and all the horrible things that these guys like to throw out there and pretending like it's the real deal, like it's real science. Like they even remotely have an understanding of what they're talking about.
He's a baseball player, for fuck's sake, right? I mean, like, I'm not saying baseball players are dumb, but I am going to sit there and say that he pointed that fact out. He had to point that fact out within the first minute of the video. What the fuck was the point of that? Who gives a shit? Oh, you're famous, right? Nobody cares. Yeah. No offense. I didn't know you played for the fucking goddamn Cardinals.
He talked about how he wanted to disprove theism, was to disprove, the theistic worldview or whatever. See, the problem with the theistic worldview, and exactly this is the problem that we can really present, at least as a point here, is there's no way to prove it or disprove it. It's just like the guy who tells you that a telepathic walrus is communicating from inside a cave on Mars. Okay, cool. What am I supposed to do in order to demonstrate whether, I can just assume that it's not true because I don't need evidence against that. You're telling me you know something and I don't. That's exactly the problem, and this is one of the major fallacies that he's presenting that his own side presents all the time. And that is, well, you can't prove there isn't. Well, you're never called on to prove a negative. That's not a thing. You don't. That's a basic understanding of logic will tell you that. And so, sorry that I can't disprove it, but you have to offer evidence for us to believe it, and that's the way this was supposed to work. And he seems to lack a basic understanding of that, which is concerning considering this is supposed to be a university.
Well, there's always the issue of you run into the no true Scotsman fallacy, saying that I used to be an atheist, and people always say, well, were you really atheist or not? When you hear that kind of argument, the only thing that I would say towards what he said there is I don't think he genuinely understood, because I don't know any atheists that go out to disprove atheism or disprove theism, is because you need to know the logical situation there. You can't disprove a negative. That's the whole point. And so it's not so much that he, the no true Scotsman thing is like, I don't think he really understood what it means to simply, when you state an atheism, all you're simply saying is you don't believe. It doesn't have anything else to do with the specific theisms or anything. It's only the singular component. And then obviously somehow tying that into the science of it is where we run into problems, because if you don't understand the basic logic and then you hear something that's really confusing and really difficult to understand when it comes to, let's say, universal physics and how things can come in and out of nothing from quantum levels, it seems improbable. But the fact that it's improbable and really difficult to understand is not evidence for any type of theistic position, in my perspective.
It's also worth noting, and I don't know if we're going into the first Big Bang, but I'm assuming we are, at least right now. The first Big Bang, stepping onto that, he talks about the beginning of the universe. Okay, well, actually, he's talking too soon. And what I mean by that is, if you ask like Alan Guth, one of the authors of the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, whether or not the universe is finite in the future, his response is, I think that the universe is likely eternal. No one knows, but it's eternal, more than likely. Now, that means that, what does that mean? Does that mean there wasn't a beginning to the universe? What that means is, what it really means is that the beginning of the universe is a temporal boundary, and that we really haven't, as human beings, fully understood the way that we're supposed to deal with that on a philosophical or how to think about that, because it's off a scale that we're just not used to dealing with. And so for him to, as a university person, to not address that part at all is a little bit frustrating and concerning to me.
Dishonest? It's just a little dishonest.
Yeah.
I mean, that's honestly what he feels like. He feels like he's almost being dishonest in his, conversation. Like, he's taking, tropes and he's going, oh, well, we don't have a definition for a beginning, and maybe he gets to it later in the video, right? I mean, and I'll allude to the later part of the video. But, he's not making the difference and understanding and presenting the difference between abiogenesis and biogenesis to begin with, A. And B, he doesn't understand that we don't really come from nothing. And that in the end, billions of years is not that long in the cosmos spectrum of things if we understand how evolution works. Now, I'm going to say I'm predisposing evolution here only because I understand how it works, personally, right now. If we were to have a debate, we'd have to demonstrate evolution and then explain how macro and micro work together before we could get to the point where we could accept the fact that billions of years is okay. So we're all going to predispose that because I think all three of us agree internally.
I think that one of the problems that he's having in this video, and it's just something that I wanted to mention, is that just because we don't know something doesn't mean we get to say that we know it. Exactly. 100% agree. He's like, I don't know, therefore I know. And you get this with UFO sightings and stuff like that, or whatever, Can't explain what that is, therefore it must be a UFO sent from a... No, you just said UFO, unidentified flying object. You already defined what it is. On a scientific level, if we're going to have a conversation on a scientific level, if you're going to tell me that I'm supposed to believe it too, then you need to present something more than some kind of non sequitur about you didn't know it, therefore you get to say and you get to define it. I don't like him talking about this situation as though they're big bangs, obviously, and that's obviously I just don't like it. But even if we allow him to say that we need these things, even if we say that, oh, and you can't explain them, so you have 4 big bangs and you can't explain them, okay? That doesn't prove anything at all about God. It says absolutely nothing. Even if he was to correctly argue all of these points in some way, okay, cool, you're right. Okay, fine, I can see you're right on every count. But you get what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I don't understand how this is in any way evidence for anything that he's presenting.
Well, the first segment, just dealing with the first Big Bang alone and his understanding of the science, and they say that in the result of a Big Bang, it's only going to produce a handful of elements, and that somehow after he said that scientists say through billions and trillions of years that all of those things have to slowly form into suns and stuff. Well, first off, he's kind of glossing over some of the most important things in the universe and dealing with all kinds of special weight principles and whether or not the gravitational rates are where they need to be and how much time came through, whether or not inflation happened, whether or not so that the universe expanded faster than the speed of light, which is a violation of relativity. There's a lot of really, really important things. The weight of the Higgs boson was recently discovered, and that was right in the dead center, so it didn't say supersymmetry, which everything has got a perfect pro and anti particle. So it's in between that and the multiverse, which basically says that, like you started off with, Joseph, that the universe is infinite and that our universe is inside of all kinds of other universes in the multiverse. Well, there's different layers of time in all of those, and then there could be a separate time for the multiverse too, and so that our perception of time is only in our universe itself, and if there's plenty of other ones. So there's a ton of options that science and mathematics allows for, and he's just glossing over some really, really important stuff and coming to a very quick conclusion that it's highly improbable that the next step has to happen. The next big bang is what the second segment was going to lead into. So once we get past the initial hard physics, which is basically the first big bang, is how improbable it is that something came from nothing, which happens all the time in quantum physics, that all kinds of special parameters happened so that all of the stars could form and collapse and create all the heavy metals and all the heavy things in the universe, and all the gravitational stuff had to happen so that we have all the elements that could make people. Then we have the next problem, which how can those things turn into organic material? So the second big bang, so to speak. Yeah. So we could get into that.
That's what he's going to talk about, right?
Yeah. So if you guys think that we've covered enough of how much they're insincere, or like you said, they're kind of dismissive of really important science, and they try to just go, yeah, well, we don't know 100%, so therefore it's really not important to know.
So I think let's move on to the second segment. I think we've killed his inability to understand the something coming from nothing concept, and maybe we should introduce him to Lawrence Krauss. He's famous enough, maybe he can just fucking reach out on his own. But so let's listen to the next Big Bang theory number 2.
How did abiogenesis occur? I mean, the notion that something can come from nothing. Where's the evidence? Well, you're going to need another something from nothing leap of faith, some kind of biological second Big Bang. For all the mind-blowing advancements we've made in physics, biology, and chemistry in just the past 100 years, we're still no closer to making it happen. We don't have a clue. The closer we look, the wider the chasm. I mean, sure, we've learned a lot about how to manipulate life forms, how to add and subtract DNA material, even map the human genome, but we have no idea how to literally create life from dead stuff. Now look, at this point, we still only have physics, chemistry, and some basic biology, or matter, energy, and simple life, if you will, but we still don't have a way to account for the great diversity of life forms. I mean, the huge differences between bacteria, plants, and animals. Nor do we have a way to account for the differences between man and animal. We still don't have an anthropology at this point.
So what we just heard, what we literally just heard, was that he's trying to allude that Noah's Ark is the only way that we could have gathered this much biology. But biology has disproved this. Evolution disproves this. He's not even touching evolution. He's just ignoring evolution and saying, well, we don't have, we don't have. And it's like, hold on a second, dude. Do you have facts on your side? Do you actually have a study? Oh, you don't? You're just basically claiming, hey, therefore it can't work, therefore it does. That makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense that you just want to claim something works that doesn't, and something that doesn't work that does.
I think that there's a little bit. You're absolutely right there. I think that there's a worthwhile point that needs to be brought up anytime you're talking about the origin of life, specifically abiogenesis, and how all that goes. And the truth of the matter is that we really don't have an answer for some of the really hard questions that the formation of life originally, and we don't have any hard answers to those questions. We have possible scenarios that could have happened, things that we think, panspermia, that's a possibility, blah blah blah. We have a model of science that's built around things that could have happened and ways in which life could have developed, and we have an understanding of the genome and DNA sequencing and all that stuff, but we don't have a solution. But that doesn't give any credence at all to his argument.
No, he's claiming, he's like, hey, guess what? You can't bring dead people back from the dead, therefore it doesn't exist. I mean, come on. How fucking dumb is that? God damn it. That's like Apologetics 101, for fuck's sake.
He doesn't have any concept at all for the earliest point of life, which all biologists agree is just chemistry. That's all it is. It's just chemical life is nothing more than complex chemistry. That's all it is. And it's at its most basic level. And you get chemistry all by itself once you have all the materials that you need from life, from the first Big Bang. So, you get the first Big Bang, you get stars, blah, 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 blah. They cook in their furnaces to create all the different aspects of the materials and whatnot that you need, and those create the chemistry that you need for life. It's really not that complicated.
We actually talked about something similar to that. We talked about something similar to that in one of our past episodes. We talked about the game of life. It's basically it's a mathematical game where it's run by a certain set of parameters and very simple parameters, and you can let this game evolve. And the bigger it gets, it becomes more and more organic. It starts acting in ways in which you would think that things were alive, things are giving birth and dying. The whole concept of the game is just through the few simple rules, we can make a really organic and complex scenario or simulation. Well, if you think of all the rules of physics, all the possible connections, combinations, covalent ionic bonds, all of the chemistry, the electron spin, everything that happens in chemistry, and take all of that stuff and all of those parameters and all of that complexity that's naturally occurring in the universe and all of the different little things. The Standard Model is filled with all kinds of different particles and components, and then mix those into a next larger scale with all the atomic and subatomic size things. There's tons of parameters and tons of little bits. Let's say we put all of those things into a soup with all the rules, and stuff starts to organically happen based on the rules and laws of physics. Well, it's possible that something could arise from that. And so what I say whenever I hear this argument from a scientifically ignorant person like this is that the gap that you're talking about, this lovely gap that we don't know where it started, it gets smaller every minute. Every time you make that argument again in the future, it's just that much smaller because we know a little bit more and we're closer and closer and closer. Recently, there have been scientists who have created synthetic DNA. What they've created, it's completely synthetic. They've got their own unique tools and tricks for making this DNA, which is one step above RNA. And RNA is just one step above organic molecules combining from crystals and becoming, let's say, self-replicatory. I mean, it's getting very small. And so the longer they say, we don't know, therefore God, the longer they say that, we're going to know eventually. I put it in the same thing with Copernican theory of, what the solar system's doing, and then when we know what the universe is doing, it's the same situation. The God of the gaps is an ugly thing, and when you hear it so many times, it gets very frustrating.
Well, what say we go to his next Big Bang? Because he obviously thinks that he's a genius, right, and that he has 4 of them that will convince us. So let's play the next Big Bang in his theory of why God should exist.
So we're going to need a kind of anthropological third Big Bang to account for all this, which of course is what Darwin was after in his Descent of Man thesis. Now look, Darwin answered a lot of questions, but he could never answer the core question. How did evolution begin? But hey, we're still not done describing the world that is all around us. A final Big Bang is going to be required to explain how a mechanistic animal brain can become a self-reflective human mind. Even the lowest life forms have brains and central nervous systems. I mean, how does something like that become the mind of a Michelangelo, a Shakespeare, a Beethoven? Come on, animals don't do art and they don't appreciate beauty. But the problem is even more basic than that. How do you account for free will and introspection, let alone man's pressing existential drive to ask why.
So he goes, we got to account for the why. And it's like, hold on, dude, you're like, what the fuck? Like, this is insanity to me. It's like, you jump from, hey, we don't have biological evidence for diversity. Well, yes, we do. We do have that. What are you talking about, dude? We fucking do have that. Do you not understand science? Do we need to have this basic conversation? All right, let's go back to that. Because you didn't present that in the first Big Bang. You're just... this dude is just literally walking down a path with his blindfold on. And so then now he's talking about, he goes, diversity, and then, then he goes to, well, how do we get to the why? How do we get from a squirrel or an amoeba with that, with a brain to a Michelangelo? Millions and millions of years, asshole. Like, how hard is that?
Well, he's assuming intentionality, which is a common it's a common mistake for primates to make, because primates grew up on the savannah, and if you don't assume intentionality, then you become someone's dinner. That's evolutionary psychology, and if I had to say it at its most basic, that's its most basic level. You two versions of yourself, both of them at a water hole. You hear a sound. One of them either looks up curiously, goes back to drinking, and the other one gets ready to fight or runs away. If you have a fear response because you assume intentionality, you're more likely to survive. That's common. And so if I had to define where mystical thinking comes from, or the assumption of intentionality, why is something done? There must be some intention here, some intended purpose. Well, that's what's called begging the question, because you are assuming something that you haven't proven yet in the thought, and it's all right, but there's still philosophical work that has to be done there. But beyond that, if you're talking about the diversity of life, which I think is, major component there, the diversity of life is explained. We know why. We don't know if there's a purpose or a point beyond that, but we can explain fully how that happened and why it happened. We can't necessarily define the origin of life, but we can certainly explain how that happened, and we can prove it. We have all of the evidence to prove it, even if we're not accounting for DNA, and DNA by itself is proof, because DNA is, as anyone can say, enough to afford a life or death sentence in a court of law. Therefore, DNA evidence of evolution is legal proof of evolution, in and of itself, by itself, not counting the fossil record, and not counting anything else.
Are you going to drop the mic after that? We got to implement that. Boop. You're like Obama right here.
Well, the issue for the third Big Bang that he gives, basically at the beginning of it, he says, well, Darwin never proved why evolution began. Well, that's the question that he's asking in the second one. It's the same thing. He's asking the same question again. So I would say that the second and the third Big Bang are basically the same one. So if he's going to say, the beginning of evolution, that's not the third Big Bang he's talking about. He's basically dealing with the problem of consciousness and the development of minds. He calls animal brains mechanistic, as to assume that there isn't some kind of pain reflex and self-awareness in animals and different varying levels of minds. You should check out a book called Kinds of Minds from Dan Dennett, where he explains the different types of minds.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, once we learn a little bit more about how and why and what makes consciousness, I personally subscribe to the idea that complexity and the fact that our brains are incredibly, incredibly complex. And as you go down on the scale, certain brains have certain types of things in excess or in minima, and those that affects whether or not it's a conscious or self-reflective or any of that kind of stuff. But human brains are, as far as I know, some of the more complex ones and have the most variety of any other creature on the planet, which is why we're considered the smartest creature on the planet. But that complexity might be the key to consciousness. The idea that a machine or a computer can ever get so complicated that eventually it will become self-aware. Well, that's not something that's impossible, but what makes us different from being organic machines and organic computers that have that ability? That's kind of what I assume will happen in the future. But his well, we don't know why, so therefore supernatural intent. I don't believe it.
He doesn't know how to move past that. And you're right. I agree with you. I think the second and the third Big Bang that he claims are just one and the same. So what do you think the fourth Big Bang is? So let's listen to
before you go there, I have a small criticism. This won't take long. He says humans from animals. Humans are animals. You're a university. Humans are fucking animals. If you know what animals are, you know what humans are animals. Fuck you. Sorry, I'm done.
Fair enough. I agree with you. I overpassed that because I thought that was too fucking stupid of a point that he obviously, that shows the ignorance right there of what he's talking about. Or the willful dishonesty. You could pick which one it is. Some of me thinks these Prager things are willfully dishonest, but we could talk about that after we finish the fourth part.
Well, we're going to need some kind of psychological fourth Big Bang to account for man's moral and aesthetic sense. I mean, his search for meaning, significance, and purpose. And, of course, his appreciation for the true, the good, and the beautiful. And again, you must understand these problems require bangs. I mean, sudden binary pops into existence, since there's no evidence for any gradual development in any of these. So I, like you, have a choice. It's either faith in these four Big Bangs of somethings from nothings to account for what we see all around us, or faith in some kind of creator God behind it all. So, next time someone asks you, hey, what about the Big Bang? Make sure you ask them, which one? The cosmological, biological, anthropological, or psychological? I'm Frank Pastore for Prager University.
So as that segment ends, if you are not infuriated, you need to, we need to have a bigger conversation, because that is probably the hardest thing to listen to. I'm shaking my desk right now. If my wife was awake, she would be sitting there at the table yelling at me, "Stop shaking the damn desk! You're making all this fucking noise in the house." But you just listening to him as he closes it out so smugly, like, you should ask them which one. It's like, no, that's not how it works. That's not, evolution isn't a Big Bang, dumbass. God damn it, for fuck's sake. Evolution is not a Big Bang. You don't understand the difference between abiogenesis and biogenesis, first off. So that's the first, like, flag right here. And then the second flag is you're equating what science shows to be faith. That's what you're equating. You're leading the witness. You're walking down this trail saying, well, if this, oh, by the way, it's faith. And like, no, you're building a straw man, dude. You build a straw man all you want, doesn't mean you're fucking right. That's what he's doing. He's building a straw man.
Well, it's if you look into evolutionary psychology on a huge level, evolutionary psychology is pretty, it's growing science still. It's still kind of early in its development, but these are the questions that it's looking for. How on earth did our brain develop into what it is? Okay, how much of it, our developmental brain, is nature, and how much of it is nurture? And what we're finding is, we're more often than not, as with a lot of questions, is the answer is both and neither. With a lot of those kinds of questions. Nature and nurture, for example, the answer for what developed us is both and neither, to some degree. There's mutation, which is random a lot of the time. So that implies there's no natural design or construct that's formulating or plan in place. Okay? And that affects our personality and affects who we are. And there's several other different components to the development of the human psyche. And the way I like to think of it is this. If you want to understand evolution and understand the jackpot that is conscious thought, yes, I get you. If you're thinking about it in terms of it acting on individuals, I understand why that would be difficult. But what we're talking about is almost an unlimited amount of time just developing entirely based around the development of whatever is survival of the fittest. And what that means is that survivability, the aptitude to survive, is the thing that is selected. And so it's the same thing as going to the slot machine and holding it down until you get 777s. And then being surprised that you got 777s and assuming there's... No, that's what evolution does. It holds down the lever until you get 777s, because only the best possible results of what the mutation is producing, the thing that makes it so you're most likely to breed, gets passed on. And so it just keeps passing on and passing on and passing on and becoming more and more, or it reflects on that which is not getting in the way of that. And so you get both. You get highly survivable and mildly mundane, but not really bad. And until, eventually species can no longer survive and breed.
I'll go even more general on this whole thing, is that basically he's arguing from a series of ignorant steps. These are questions that we don't know the answers to, and this is the issue that I have with a lot of apologetics and stuff, is they like to latch onto something that we can't give an absolute for, because they can so easily toss out absolutes, as will, because that's one of the best things you can do, is say, do you absolutely know this? Do you absolutely know that? Well, that's what Prager used to do. He was an apologist who walked around giving speeches on religion all of the time, and so this is, more derivative of that. And all I say to these arguments is simply that you're basically making an argument from whatever ignorance thing. So there's some kind of improbability that you're thinking is too difficult for natural occurrence in the real physical world to overcome. So what do we have? We have a deistic perspective. That is what you're arguing for, because there's in no way are you able to get to the Christian God without this deep, deep, deep slippery slope of things that have to happen perfectly. So the argument that these people are doing, it's a deistic perspective of an online, or of a first mover, a prime director, somebody who exists outside of the universe. And that's usually not what they're going for. They're trying to prove a Christian God, and they're using these arguments, and you can't get to those. And so I say, well, you don't know all of these things, but this still doesn't help you prove a Christian God. At anything, this would prove the God of the gaps or a first mover at best. And it's even
like Christopher Hitchens said, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he basically said if it's a deistic God, right, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't interact with us. It doesn't fucking matter.
I know.
Nobody cares.
Yeah, So the multiverse could be the deistic God. I mean, it's whatever. So I'm comfortable saying I don't know. Some people aren't comfortable saying they don't know. I am. I'll wait for the evidence to come in, and I'll learn more in the future. And hopefully during my lifetime, we'll learn some more. But more than likely, all the answers won't be solved when I'm dead. And when I'm dead, I won't be sad that I'm no longer alive, because I'll be dead.
You won't care. you won't give a shit.
No.
You'll be fucking dead. But we're going to burn you, though, and drink for your grave, just so you know, if you live longer than me.
But can you, imagine what it would be like? Let's say that from an atheistic perspective, the point of living is to learn. That's the only reason I can think of. And so I am not at all offended by the idea that I don't know everything, that there are huge gaps in my own knowledge and my own ability to understand things. That doesn't offend me at all, because those are new and exciting things that I can be exposed to and can learn. And so that is a fundamental difference in the psyche here that we're addressing. It is difficult, and it might bring up a little bit of a point that I made in an earlier part of this portion, but it is difficult to admit that you don't know something. It's difficult to admit there isn't a plan. It's difficult to admit there isn't agency. It's difficult to admit that things are random and complex and not fated, and that's hard for us to deal with. It is much, even if we prefer the devil acting on our lives to random chance. We just do. And we do because at least then I can explain it. But that's not, you can't. You're just throwing an explanation at it, declaring that that's the explanation, and sorry, but that might not be it. And the honest person and the honest scientist will admit this. That's the thing that's so offensive about this, is this is supposed to be a university. They're not. They're a fake university. That's the point.
So with the fake university, and as we wrap the episode out, because we do got to get out of here and get into the next segment, but as we wrap this up, we want to look at, you're right, it's a fake university. It's not something that is meant to be taken seriously, in my opinion. And I'm sure people do. I'm sure people think this is the way to go. But if you understand education, you would understand that this is not something that you should just go participate in and think you're going to get some fucking degree out of this. As we wrap the segment up and we look towards what we're going to do in the future, I think this is a great segment. I think what they're doing is they're taking information, presenting it and packaging it in a fancy way to try and draw people in, using verbiage that will allude to the fact that they are more intelligent than other individuals. And that's my problem with it. And I think that's part of the reason Joseph came to us and said, hey, we haven't done this in a long time. Let's hang out. Let's have this conversation. Let's do these things. Let's talk about Prager University, because for fuck's sake, all they want to do is present false ideas, false information, and a allusion to the fact that they are more intelligent than others. But as we leave the segment, hey, Joseph, if there's anything you can part with, any place people can find you, because I know you have a Twitter, not that you're very active. I do know you have a Twitter, though, and I do know you're on Facebook, but people want to get a hold of you, I'm sure. People are going to listen to this, and they're going to be like, holy fuck, I want to talk to that guy, because as he gets his degree, he knows a lot and would have a valid conversation. And he admits when he's wrong about Trump. And so, tell everybody where they can find you, Joseph.
I run a support network primarily for atheists who are coming out of the closet as atheists to family members. They lose their family sometimes, or maybe they just need someone to talk to. We've been working on it for quite some time. I see a ton of people, all online, from all around the world, who contact me through this group. It's called the Godless Support Network. Our motto is no creeds, just people, and our focus is helping anyone who is in need of care or help or etc. For situations of this nature where family doesn't want to be around you anymore. The service goes as far as just common communication, or I'll even call psychologists in your area and make sure that you don't have to face rejection of a psychologist. That's another aspect. But yeah, Godless Support Network, we're on Facebook. I will be trying to get my Twitter more active. And yeah, that's the best places to get a hold of me anyway.
Well, thank you, Joseph. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We do have to let you go. We don't want to spend too much time. We've had two great segments, one about Trump and how Hannah has endorsed him since Bernie's failing, and a segment about Prager University and how horrible they are. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll throw all your links in the description. And what we're going to do is take a quick commercial break so I can refresh my drink. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
This is Ishmael Brown, the HNIC from the Angry Black Rant podcast, and you're listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much, and prepare for the revolution.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old Atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the Cellar Door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
This is Trav Mamone, host of the By Any Means podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. We have cookies.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for sticking around through those first two segments. We talked a lot about Trump. We debunked Prager University. Right now, we got an interesting interview that we're going to present. We had an author that we kind of discovered a little bit through Twitter. And yes, I know if you listen to the Zacharlage podcast a couple weeks ago, you'll see that I'm not a big Twitter person, and I have a hard time keeping up with it. But we do manage to make some very interesting connections. And this individual reached out to me, and he said, hey, you want to talk to an author about kind of a comedic aspect to atheism and God? And I said, well, yeah, sure, of course, would love to do that. And the caveat is this gentleman is from England, so it's even better. So we're going to get a whole different perspective than some of the other guests that we've had on the show. So the gentleman's name is Matthew James. His book is called Only an Atheist Can Help God Save the World. So if you'll give a warm welcome to Mr. Matthew James. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm awesome. Well, I guess technically for me it's not night. For you it's night. For me technically it's not night. You're what, 4 or 5 hours ahead of me, aren't you?
I think I'm about 5 hours ahead of you now. It's early evening, sort of dusk time here in the UK.
We wanted to have you on to talk about your book and to kind of get a different perspective on why you wrote it and all those different things. But before we get into it, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? Kind of give everybody an overall background about you and your life and how you came to decide that you wanted to write this book.
So my background is science. I have a degree and PhD in neuroscience. In 2010, my wife and I moved abroad to Halifax in Nova Scotia, where we lived for 5 years and had a fantastic time. Wonderful place to live. Really loved the place. And then in 2014, we moved back to the UK. In the summer of 2012, I had a brief spell of unemployment. I was between contracts. In science, you kind of get used to short-term contracts. You get used to, especially if you're like between your PhD and whatever you're going to do in the long term. And I had an opportunity to write. I had a reasonable amount of money coming in from government unemployment in Canada. I'd paid into the scheme and I got some money out, which supported me for a while I found a job. And while I found a job, I decided to write a novel. The novel, as you said, Only an Atheist Can Help God Save the World, is a satire book. So hopefully it's funny. Reviews people have been giving me say it is humorous and they enjoyed it. But it was a fun take on what would happen if an atheist like myself were to actually meet God. And this happens about, 4 chapters into the book, about 40% of the way into the book, and what that scenario would be like. So it's written from the point of view of comedy. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and hopefully it just points out some of the inherent silly things there are to do with religion and the church and all those sorts of things.
So in the book, and let's talk a little bit about the book. So you're writing basically a fictional novel is basically what it is, about how an atheist meets God. Does the atheist no longer be an atheist by the end of the book then? I mean, I guess if God were to come to me, I wouldn't be able to claim I was an atheist anymore. I think I would inherently have to believe in something unless I rejected it as an individual.
Well, I see this argument a lot on Twitter whenever people put this argument forward of, I would believe in God if he showed himself. And although I hadn't heard that argument before when I was writing the book, I mean, from a scientific perspective, it makes perfect sense. Presented with the evidence for something, of course you would believe. You would be quite happy to change your opinion. And so in the book, God's kingdom has become a bureaucracy. He's become so utterly entrenched in bureaucracy, and the angels control everything that he can't get anything done. They presented this as an option to him when his temper got the better of him, when he sent plagues and famines and so on and so forth, and they tried to calm him down and keep him in a better state of mind. I mean, if anyone who's read the Old Testament knows the God of that period is quite fiery. He's quite wrathful.
You could say it. He's a fucking...
Exactly. So he gets caught up in this bureaucracy, and then the problem becomes when he learns what we're doing to our planet, when he learns the destruction we're inflicting on our world, he can't do anything about it. He's effectively become powerless within this bureaucracy. So he has to go to the committee, which is 4 of his archangels who now are the real power in heaven, and get permission to come to Earth. And when he gets here, the restrictions under which he works are so fierce that he can't. The only person who can actually help him, who can see him, is an atheist. And I thought this was such a lovely twist on having him come to Earth, but not meet a religious person, having him meet an atheist, and then have them have conversations where God can explain a little bit about what he is and what he's done in this particular novel.
And so during the book, as he's working with the atheist, does the atheist, so if the atheist is helping him, why would the atheist want to help God? Or is it kind of like a mutual thing? Hey, we want to stop the destruction of the earth.
Yeah, it is sort of a mutual thing. They both want to prevent what we're doing to our own planet. The thing is, in the book, Jeffrey the atheist, he can see that this is God. He has a sort of sixth sense that allows him to actually see beyond what's presented to him. And so when he realizes that this actually is something out of the ordinary, he takes some time, but once he thinks about it, he thinks, hey, why not? Like, this is a worthy cause. This is something that should be addressed. And as I said, I would say most atheists out there presented with evidence of something else would actually be willing to believe. It wouldn't be religion anymore. It would be science. So, yeah, once Jeffrey commits to helping God, then they go off on a crusade to try and find some way for God to actually reach out to people and convince them that we need to change our ways.
So, and you don't have to give the end of the book away, but does the atheist convert, or does the atheist decide at some point, or maybe convinces God to reveal himself to everybody so there's no longer a need for atheism?
He doesn't convert so much into some form of religion, but he is a changed person by the end of the book. He has met and he's helped God. He tries to then move forward and do things in a different way to what religion does, so without the religious aspects of things. And also, God himself is actually changed in the book quite considerably from where he starts and where he ends, which seemed like
a Christian God then, Kenny, because that God never changes.
Well, I think if you compare the gods of the Old and the New Testament, you could make the case that he has changed quite a lot. The way he does things, not the way he does things, the way the books are written are so different that there's a different spin on it. But yeah, I do see your point.
Do you tackle inside of the book any of the paradigms, where what we see today? So in the atheist community and in the Christian community, there's a lot of discussion about proofs and evidences for God. And, so in your book, Jeffrey, he probably obviously doesn't need as much evidence because he's talking to somebody specifically from heaven, whereas the majority of us would not be. So do you get into any of the circumstances where people bring up these questions where they go, hey, okay, well, hold on a second. I've never seen proof of God. You can't just tell me there's a God. We actually have to see action. So do they kind of go back and forth? Does he give, does he give counsel to God on how he could be a better God?
He doesn't give counsel to God so much as they go and they share cups of tea in a tea room, and they have discussions about what God is and the responsibilities that fall to this being within this universe. A lot of these things that you're talking about, like, I've come to since writing the book. Like, I didn't really join Twitter until after the book was finished, and I tried the traditional publishing route to try and get it published, and nobody was interested in publishing a book that satirizes religion, and I don't really blame them, to be honest. It's kind of a hard audience to find. I mean, there are other comparable books out there that you could talk about, things like Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's Good Omens, but I mean that never really goes after religion per se. It's just a book that uses certain characters in a comedic way. I don't really go after religion in the book, but I do address certain things, such as the God in this book. He doesn't really believe in religion as it is. He doesn't really believe in people being killed for their faith and that sort of thing. And he talks about that in the book. And that was kind of a fun way to have an atheist directly ask God some questions and say, what's up with this and what's up with that? Yeah, a lot of these discussions I see on Twitter, they would be fun things to explore in a book down the line, because a lot of the discussions that go round and round, they're very smart, they're very well reasoned and thought out, and yeah, maybe things for a future book down the line.
So is this the first book that you've ever written then?
It is, yes.
So you do have plans then, I take it, to write other ones. And I'll tell you, I agree with you. I've never tried to publish a book, but, we've talked with other authors, and, I've done a podcast / web show for, 3 years now, roughly. And I've met a lot of people. It's very hard to get things published nowadays. It is not, it's not like anybody can just pick it up, and then you got to fight with certain bureaucracies per se that, to get buy-in, and, unless you want to front the cost for absolutely everything all up front. And so I can see how it would be very difficult to break into that. But I do know that there's a lot of people, especially when they enjoy writing, want to continue moving forward, even, if they can't get with a bigger publisher.
So my impression has been that the traditional publishing industry is quite timid. It's quite scared of any sort of risk. It's always looking for the next Harry Potter without being willing to actually take a risk on the next Harry Potter. I mean, all of these things that come along and become big franchises, before they were big franchises, they were nothing. They were something that required somebody to invest some time and money into them to actually launch them, and then you never quite know. They're always looking for the next Hunger Games rather than the next thing that would be something distinct in its own field and become the next Hunger Games, if you see what I mean. Like, they want the easy follow-up. They want the next teen dystopian book when there's already 5 teen dystopian fantasy books out there that you don't need any more in that field. The one upside to this that I can see is that it sort of feels like the self-publishing route is really starting to come into its own now. Like, you don't need a publishing house particularly to get your work out there. I mean, it's hard, and you're still fighting every day to try and get people to notice you and to try and pay attention to what you're doing. But the upside is that things like Twitter have made it possible for you to now reach an audience, and you can do this. It's slow going and it takes some time, but I've found that I've slowly started to build a following where people are following me and I'm following them, particularly atheists who are a particularly good and accepting crowd on Twitter. Like, they're quite easy to get you to follow them back, and they will pay attention to you. Like, they'll give you a second to just see whether they're interested. So, I mean, I post on my Twitter feed, I post adverts for my book. I post little excerpts from the novel to try and just give people an idea of what it is and what it reads like and what kind of a book it is. And then I've managed to get a handful of reviews so far from other atheists. So I have 4 or 5 reviews, the latest of which was actually a 5-star review that somebody gave me that I was just stunned by. Like, it really worked for them and it really clicked with it. And then you can take that 5-star review and you can retweet it at regular interviews. And once you have those sort of pieces in place, people will then start to pay more attention to you.
Yeah, and actually, I saw that the other day that you had that rating, and it was like, holy crap, that's really cool, like, and so it must make you feel proud because after a while you kind of go, hey, look, I was able to do something, and people are catching on, and because I mean, you don't want to write a book for just yourself. I mean, you have to think, yeah, I could write it for myself, and it would be entertaining, or maybe my kids, but in reality, you're hoping to garner attention inside of either the atheist community or even the Christian community. So what are some of the overall goals that you have? I mean, I understand it is a comedy, it is a fiction, but do you have a desire, an ulterior message that you kind of want to put out there? Are you trying to start a conversation? You know, what are you looking towards to gain going forward in the future?
Well, for myself in the short term, I'd love to make enough money off my writing so I could actually do that full time. I mean, that would be brilliant. I understand how difficult that is. I understand that it takes a very long time to build up a head of steam to the point where enough people are buying your book regularly that you have enough money coming in. That's, at the moment, that's a semi-long-term goal. Like, for the more immediate future, just getting as many people as I can read, as I can persuade to read it in the current time. I don't know how many people have bought the book. Like, I don't have a figure. I'm trying not to worry too much about how many people have bought it. I do know there's a small but growing number of people who've been messaging me to say, I've just grabbed your book. And I'm like, fantastic. I love it. Write me a review when you're done, because I'd love to know what you think. And increasingly more people are doing that. In the long run, worldwide domination would be great. If I can become the next J.K. Rowling, I'd be happy. It's not a realistic goal. It's just a fun joke. But I'm writing a sequel to to Only an Atheist. I'm about halfway through. It's called Jesus Returns. Here he comes again. I had an absolute blast writing this Only an Atheist. I really had so much fun writing it. I'm having as much fun writing in Jesus Returns. So I'll keep writing them as long as people are interested in buying them. And to be honest, the other thing that's really striking me right now is the atheist community of podcasters like yourself, people who are willing to let a debut novelist with a few reviews come on their show and have a chat. I mean, that is something quite special right there.
Yeah. Well, you know what? So what I found is that bringing on national guests, while it may probably entertain more people because more people know them and can relate to them, to me that doesn't help grow society. If we want to look at grassroots logic and understanding it, and who I find interesting to have a conversation with. You know, one of my favorite guests, and I said this on the Zacrilege show, was Abby Smith, and she gave 2 talks, I think, and she writes a blog. And her full-time job is she's a virologist, I believe, and she works on vaccines, and you know she's working on an HIV vaccine. That's interesting to me. She doesn't have to be known. For me, that's somebody I would listen to in my personal life. You know, somebody like your book. It's an interesting concept. It's something that I don't think has been done, No, I'd say I don't think I've ever actually heard that specific concept. And I think, you know, in a minute we could talk, you know, a little bit about your past. But to me, the big thing is getting other people to recognize, you know, some of these local artists. Because, you know, if you buy into this large corporate giant, right, you know, you're going to have to pay your dues. You're going to have to do all this publishing stuff. You can self-publish. And so we want to work together to help promote each other. Because I find what you do interesting. You find what I do interesting. And I think the more we do that, the more we'll diversify people's learning ability so that we're not just focused on 1 or 2 main mega individuals.
Sounds good to me.
Quick question, and I guess it doesn't have to be a quick question, but, you know, tell us a little bit about, you know, if you're an atheist. I'm assuming you are, but I probably shouldn't assume. I mean, you are from England, and over there religion is a hell of a lot fucking different than it is. I mean, in America, it seems like people wear it on their chests as badges and scars, whereas in England, to me, it feels like religion is more of a neutral type thing. People aren't as, I don't know, up in arms over it. So tell us a little bit about your background when it comes to religion. Were you religious and you deconverted? Have you always kind of not really been religious, or are you still religious and just thought it'd be funny to write a novel about an atheist and God?
So I'm an atheist. That probably should have been said in the first 5 minutes of this show, but moving on. I've always been an atheist. I actually, and again, from being on Twitter and from talking to people, I feel quite lucky that I've been able to be an atheist my entire life. I was effectively raised without religion. The only time I ever went in a church was when I was a scout. There would occasionally be a parade on a Remembrance Sunday, and we would go in churches for that sort of thing. But besides that, I'd never been in a church, so they were quite unusual and quite foreign to me. England is pretty secular. People, they are religious. I think a large percentage of the population is religious, but it's not a big deal. And I think most people's religions in the UK, most people's religion of the UK people is a very personal thing. It's a very private thing. If they believe, they don't feel the need to impose on other people. They don't feel the need to really even necessarily talk to other people about it. They go to church pretty regularly, a lot of them, but it's not as much of an out and proud thing as it is in the States. I don't think it affects our politics in quite the same way.
You don't have Ted Cruz running around over there.
Oh,
so.
Goodness, Jesus. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure which is worse, to be honest, Cruz or Trump. I don't honestly know if there's a...
How about this? It really, in my opinion, almost all conservative politics are horrible. But I am biased. I'm definitely not a conservative. Anybody listening will definitely know that by now. But so as we wrap up, and because I don't want to take too much of your time tonight, but as we wrap up, what you got to tell us a little bit of what you think of American politics, because I don't always get to have an individual from Great Britain join the show, and so. I think getting outside perspectives on what the fuck is going on in America is interesting sometimes. And sometimes, it's funny because I'll tell a story. I've always had cable, but I never liked news. I've hated news. I always hated politics until I got older. And then I started voting, and then it's like, holy shit, this shit really pisses me off. And then so you have to engage. You have to read the articles. You have to watch the shows, stuff like that. But I actually watch BBC News more than I watch American news. I'll be honest with you. I don't. But it's like you ask my kids, they'll be like, "Oh, you're listening to NPR, Dad," or "Oh, you got BBC News on." And I do. I don't know. I don't watch as much until usually election years. I do quite a bit of American politics in election years. A, because it's podcast gold to a point, and B, because it's a little bit easier. There's more information than that comes out of Great Britain, but. Tell us what your ideas are, what you think. I mean, do you see a circus running around, or is this somewhat similar to what happens over there?
So my wife and I were in the States about 10 years ago, and we were staying with an American family briefly then. And the dad of the family actually said to us at that time that if he wanted news, he went to the BBC. Like you said, he didn't trust American news networks. He went to the BBC. I think that the biggest problem for both American and UK politics is that increasingly your political parties don't represent you. They don't represent you, your interests, or anyone you know. They represent other interests. And so it's very easy to become detached from the political parties. I don't know if this applies to the US as well, but it definitely applies to the UK. But when we lost our unions in the 70s and the 80s, we effectively lost the link between working people and politics, because you would pay your union dues, and then the unions would have a say in who gets elected, and then the politicians would have a direct link to you and your money and your interests. And when we lost the unions in the 70s and 80s, the politicians had no choice but to turn elsewhere for the money they needed to get elected. They couldn't get the money from the state, so they went to anyone who was willing to bankroll them. And once that happens, you effectively lose your political process. You lose any interest the politicians have of serving you. So they get their money from business, they get their money from corporations, and that's who they serve. Because they have to.
Yeah,
they can't not serve the people who are bankrolling them. It would be suicide. But then what you have is a case of the politicians no longer represent the people. They don't serve you. They don't represent you. They increasingly become a class all of their own. And you have what is now known as a political elite, whose primary interest is their own enrichment and keeping themselves in power. And once they join forces, as they very much did in the UK, and I suspect in the States too, with the media, you no longer get reporting on what the politicians do. You don't get reporting on their mistakes. You don't get reporting on their scandals. The media has an interest in keeping all this out of public hands. And the kind of extension of this as you go further and further along is Fox fucking News. And then you have a system where you cannot trust Fox News. You can't believe in what they say. Yet a significant percentage of Americans go to them for their news.
They do. It's interesting, though. They're like a comedy show sometimes.
If it wasn't so important, it would be really, really funny.
That's very true. Well, you know, and what's funny, too, is and now we're kind of moving off topic a little bit, but, you know, on The Daily Show, they had a gentleman named John
Oliver.
And he's got his own show now on HBO. And
it's superb.
It is. And you know, it's funny, though, because he gets to inject a whole different perspective. And that's kind of, I know he's been over here for a while, but I kind of like the other perspective. And, you know, I mean, I like the accent, too. I'll be honest. I'm very partial to British accents. But he when he started doing his own show, I was very excited. We watched that, you know, the wife and I watched that every week. We love that show. And we like the different take he takes on it. It's even different than how Jon Stewart used to see things. And so it's good. I wish, you know, we could just get rid of the oceans and kind of make everybody just one big nation. We probably would solve a lot of problems if we could be all one large. And now, see, I sound like the Antichrist here, but we could be one large nation, and I think we might be able to move some money around a little differently to help people better.
Last Week Tonight is superb TV. He is allowed to do serious investigative journalism. I mean, his takedown of things like FIFA were just brilliant. And that was before America actually managed to take down FIFA. The things HBO let him spend money on are phenomenal. I don't quite know. I love it. I genuinely love it. But I would love to know what process goes by where HBO say, yes, you can spend money on getting a lung costume made so you can take the piss out of tobacco companies, and you can spend money rebuffing the president of Trinidad and Tobago on national TV in their country. Who in the hell besides him would ever be allowed to do those insanely brilliant things? The stuff he does, I every week we watch it and we're just astonished at what they do.
It is. And so I agree with you. So now we just need to get a little bit more British politics over here, maybe some comedians. I mean, I guess we do, you know, like ironically enough, as a kid growing up, I grew up really conservative, very conservative Christian. But, you know, when I became a teenager, I started hanging out with secular individuals, and I found out about Eddie Izzard, one of my favorite fucking comedians of all time. Love the guy. Genius. You know, Ricky Gervais, kind of the same thing. That was when he was starting to get into his prime, you know, well before he was popular. And I got introduced to a lot of these comedians, and, you know, there's just a whole different take that I think American comedians and American politics misses sometimes.
Yeah, I used to love Eddie Izzard. I saw him live a few years ago, actually.
Oh, I'm very jealous of you. Very, very jealous. And it's funny because, you know, back in the day, when I was 15, I was, you know, outside protesting against abortion clinics, right? I was not accepting of LGBT people for a while. And then, you know, a couple of years later, you meet some people, and then all of a sudden, you know, you change your views, which is actually, for me, was one of the starts to the descent out of Christianity for me. My church was very anti-LGBT. So that started me questioning, because I had friends that I met, and I was like, holy shit, you know, what? Why would people believe like this? This is stupid. and you know, so you do the research, and then you just say, well, this is all a bunch of bullshit. But it was funny because, you know, Eddie Izzard came on and he talks about being a transvestite, and he actually talks about the differences and these different things. So I got introduced to a different type of a culture that, you know, he basically said, hey, it's more acceptable on this side of the world, where it's not here in America. America's not as accepting as it is over here in Europe. So it's kind of nice to get a little bit of a taste of that growing up.
It seems to me that all that stuff about the anti-abortion arguments and the LGBT arguments and the trans people arguments. It's all distractions, really. It's all getting people worked up to fight against something that really should have been decided by now. Like, it should just be one of those things that's done and dusted. We shouldn't really care about who marries who. We shouldn't really care about what washroom people use based on their previous or current sexual identity. It's all distraction and nonsense, really, and we should be so far past that point of discussion.
I agree. So as we wrap this segment up, make sure you can tell everybody where they can get a hold of you, because if they can't get a hold of you, they can't buy your book, and we will put links in the description. I have a link to his book in the description, as well as his WordPress site and his Twitter. But is there anywhere else that we can get a hold of you that you want us to get a hold of you at?
So the book's available as an ebook, and it's available basically anywhere you can buy an ebook from. So when you're a self-published author, you tend to use two sites to upload to. You upload to Amazon, and that's the primary place where most people will buy the book. And then you upload to another site called Smashwords. So if people wanted to, they could buy it from Smashwords, but then Smashwords is brilliant because it will then upload to all the other e-retailers as well. So it'll upload to Barnes & Noble, it'll upload to the Nook, which is one of the UK e-readers, it'll upload to everywhere else, the Apple Store and all the other ones. So whatever device someone has, they can get it from whichever store they want to. As you said, I run a blog at WordPress, onion-atheist.wordpress.com, where I review books. Politics is a big interest of mine, so I've been reviewing lots of political books in the last couple of years, things like Owen Jones' The Establishment, Laurie Penny's Unspeakable Things. I read a phenomenal book recently, which is all about the politics we've been talking about, called The Triumph of the Political Class, which explains a huge amount about where our politics has gone the last 15, 20 years. And that's phenomenal. I also publish articles on being a self-published author, atheism. Comic books is a huge thing of mine. I love comic books. So I write on there about that. And yeah, the sequel to my book, Jesus Returns, Here He Comes Again, will be out as and when I can actually finish the damn thing.
And that concludes the show tonight. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around through another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Make sure you give us a rating on iTunes, a rating on Spreaker, like, subscribe to all our social media gibberish. Send us an email at cellardoorskeptics.com and tell us what you think of the show. And with that, I wish you all a wonderful evening. Have a good night, everyone.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.